Welcome to the SENCast. My name is Dale Pickles, Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the SENCast. We started this podcast a number of years ago to help improve knowledge around SEND. There's lots of stuff you can read, but we're all very busy and we don't have the time. So we created the SENCast to try and help support schools and everyone involved in SEND. And it is great to get that same consistent message to both parents and schools, so they all have the same understanding. This week, my guests were Dr. Sarah Moseley and Ginny Bootman, and they were back to record another episode in a series around early literacy. Sarah is an educational consultant specialising in reading and self-esteem, and Ginny is currently the SENCO of 4 schools in Northamptonshire. She also talks at various events and has also written books for SENCOs. And also, this episode is part of a series around early literacy, and in this episode we discussed cracking the code, early print concepts and literacy readiness. The SENCast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. We are the assessment people. We are known to helping schools to show those small steps of progress that pupils with SEND can make. And over the last few years, we've been creating an inclusive assessment system that can be used with all pupils in primary schools. And the system has different levels of detail for different levels of ability, but it makes looking at whole school data and comparing your SEND and non-SEND pupils really, really simple. And it also reduces teacher workload by just having to use one system. And our new AI features simplify reporting and will do even more. And obviously, having one system saves schools money. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. Now, let's get on with that podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing cracking the code, early print concepts and literacy readiness. And this week, my guests are Dr. Sarah Moseley and Ginny Bootman. Sarah is an educational consultant specialising in reading and self-esteem. And as an educational consultant, she supports schools to raise outcomes for all learners, helping schools turn theory into practice. Ginny is currently a SENCO of 4 schools. She has been a teacher for a very long time, a senior manager and a head teacher. Both Sarah and Ginny have written books to support professionals. As always, welcome back, Sarah and Ginny.
Hello, Dale. Lovely to be back, as always.
Hello from me.
We were just discussing, is it Sarah and Ginny or Ginny and Sarah? But that's a whole other conversation we will move past.
Potato.
So this is the 3rd episode in this series around literacy and how to help all learners to succeed. And this episode, we're moving on to cracking the code, early print concepts and literacy readiness. And this is the first episode in this series where the students are looking at the books, text or symbols and trying to take meaning from them.
Wonderful. And of course, in this episode, when we're talking about the books, what we have to be aware of is that the books have to be implicit in everything. So they're there from the beginning. So it's not necessarily that we just introduce the books now. It's that we're continuously introducing books, but we're thinking about why are they so important? I think that's what we wanted to focus on in this episode.
Yeah, so in the previous one, we've talked about that kind of phonological awareness, and those are really early literacy books, which will be kind of seeing books and having books read to them. But this is kind of that first kind of point where you're actually trying to get the books to them. But it all goes alongside together. It's not like an order.
They have a readiness. That's it. It's not, I think that's part of some of the work that we're doing within special schools, or quite a few years ago, probably when I was doing my PhD, which is like 16 years ago. It was talking about that kind of concept of reading readiness. And actually that's something which is now understood that that's not the case. It is about making sure that you've got the opportunities and experiences from the very start, but actually it's being aware of the actual role that physical books play and that text plays in terms of digital text as well and text around us. But actually it's understanding why it's so important.
Nice.
Thanks, Sarah. I always like a nice from Dale. Nice, Sarah.
It sounds like what was the old comedy where you go, nice? There was an old 90s comedy used to say it like that. I can't remember who it is.
I can't think. I know.
I'm literally going, I will get it. No, it's not coming. It's not coming.
No,
but that's the thing. I think we read to our children, and there is that stage where they start to recognize. And I think most times I remember their children pointing at the McDonald's logo and understanding what that means. And it's understanding those, you said, digitally or wherever, understanding that when they see something, there's a meaning behind it.
And, that comes from the very beginning with that symbolic awareness, understanding that something carries a meaning. And actually, that's why things like logos and all of those things, which are really, you want to have them having engaging experiences, engaging and wanting to do that themselves. So wanting to actually understand or recognize that symbol that stands for that. And then actually that's the kind of beginning of it. And then you start to kind of develop that into letters and how words go together and how their name represents them and where they might find their name. That's their space in their classroom, where they put their belongings. It's all of that stuff around print carries something meaningful to them. And that's such an important thing to get from a very early age for all learners.
I think it's really interesting, having been a reception teacher, this idea of when children come into school, they often have, and I'll be interested in what you think about this, Sarah. They often come in and they have their name written and they have a symbol. And the symbol goes on their tray alongside their name, and then it goes on their peg. And I know back in the day when I was a reception teacher, their name was on a little hook with the symbol, and if they wanted to go in the sand, they hung that on there, and then they moved it around. But I'm quite interested as to the relationship between that child's symbol and their name. I'm guessing they go symbol then name, or do they go together?
It is that kind of symbolic way. It's kind of pictorial initially, like objects. So within, you'd have an object of reference within a kind of like, if you're thinking about a development of communication and understanding of meaning, then you might go to a picture, which is a bit more abstract than, you can get a picture of a dog, but it could not be the dog that you know as a dog. Then you may get a symbol, which again could be further kind of removed and more abstract, which represents a dog, whether it be a big dog, a small dog, a black dog, a white dog. And then you move to this kind of understanding that that symbol can represent all dogs. And then you get the word, which actually is, again, that kind of the next link, that this is how kind of across our English language, we use the word, which we can then combine within stories and writing to represent our dog, your dog, somebody else's dog. So it is that, but as we know, children don't go as smoothly through those kind of stages. And I think that's really important. Go on, Dale. What were
I
you
was thinking, and I can't remember, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but I think it was Sue from Widget was talking along the lines of that. Often when you do have that and you go into reception, there is your name and then there'll be a symbol beneath it. But they literally might have picked a football or a gold star or a slide or a swing, which actually has no relationship to you. You are not a swing or a star or a football, but it is a symbol you'll hopefully recognize and you go, okay, that means me in this context. But there is something about, I think, and again, I think it was in terms of Widget, that the symbol should, you should be able to identify that that symbol is related to that object. So a dog would look like a dog and you mean that is representing a dog. Whereas I think on those sorts of things in those hooks, you are just picking a symbol. So they learn that symbol and their name will be above it. And hopefully they'll slowly transition to recognizing their name and you can remove the star. But there's that some symbols are very much related to what it is. So you see a picture of a burger, great, it's going to be burgers. But somehow you see golden arches and you know that means a burger.
And that's the whole thing about that with communication, with literacy, is that kind of more abstract that it becomes. And there is a really interesting debate about symbols and words and reading and the use in writing. And it's really interesting. I know that the widget has become increasingly popular within schools to support vocabulary. I think absolutely key. It's always been popular in terms of definitely within special education for supporting communication and being absolutely vital and independence. And then in mainstream schools now, it's looking at it also within special schools, vocabulary, and ensuring that it gives that extra bit of visual information about vocabulary. And there's so much about that supports learners, particularly our learners with the more kind of, we've got so many different needs now that we're looking at and differences, and processing and understanding, and too much print without any other cue to hook you in means that you may not understand any of it. But if you've got your vocabulary wall about, I always go back to Romans, you might have some of the words and you might have some of the symbols on their from widget or similar kind of symbols. And that will hook in whether or not you've got strong literacy skills, that those are the words you might want to use in your writing. And actually, that's really important.
Because you might say the word, you might hear the word and understand it. You see a word written, you're going, I don't know what that is. But when that symbol above it relates to what it is, you're like, that's how that's word written.
And that's a really important point, because actually I think there's a kind of a bit of a confusion about, actually, let's just symbolize. I've seen schools that have sent home letters to parents that are all symbolized. Now, find out from parents, have they found that useful? Look at the symbols that you're using, because although a lot of the symbols are completely related to specific words, say a dog, the symbol for the is, of course, because the is something abstract. So actually, too many symbols can make the text more confusing, and actually be better off simplifying your text and maybe underneath it providing some symbols to give some understanding. So there's a real need to have a consistent understanding across your school, a whole school kind of understanding about, if you want your learners to read print, they need exposure to print on its own. So I had a wonderful teaching assistant many moons ago who used to symbolize all my reading books for me. And I think they were Oxford Reading Tree reading books, and she would take them home, symbolize them. And actually, it's that conversation around, for children that are learning to read, that made that text more complex. Because trying to read a sentence with lots of symbols over the top of it is, for independence, for them to be able to pick it up and go, I know what this is about because I recognize some of these symbols, great. But for them to be able to read the cat sat on the mat, actually having a symbol and the word, they'll look at the symbol and it's just too much information. It can be an overload. So it's a real clarity around, what's the purpose of my document or the print. If I want them to read print, and this isn't me just saying this is research for my PhD, it's not, and lots of research out there, some great research, no matter how small you make a symbol, it will always be the first thing a child looks at. And actually, if you want them to read the word the, they have to see the word the. They could have a symbol on the back of the card, or if you want to read dog, you've got a picture on the back or a symbol on the back, great. But if they're looking for vocabulary to use in their writing or understanding or their speech, having your topic words on the board with a symbol gives them a way in, as opposed to looking at it just being wallpaper of lots of print that they can't access anyway. Don't want to start a thing here, because widget, fabulous, really, but it's about your intent.
Yeah.
And understanding what it is that learner needs and how you can best support them.
So if you are literally, that thing about kind of reading the words, if you have a picture of a dog, you're not really reading the words, you just know the symbol, it's a dog. But actually you want them to look at the word, try and see if they know it. And if they can't get it, they could turn the card over and go, oh, it's kind of doing that work. Whereas other times you said kind of what we're writing about, that bigger thing. Yeah, use the widgets, but don't use them everywhere. It's what is your intention?
What about then, Sarah, the idea of the word the?
Yep.
And that has a shape, because the word the, and I've seen where people make words into like kind of blocks. So children can actually say, that is the word there because of the height of the letters, but they actually do it as, you can do it as blocks. So you can't actually see the letter. So that would be one shape, a bit like Tetris, isn't it? That would be one shape, and they would be a different shape, even if you couldn't maybe see the letter. Where does that sit within all of this?
I think what we're thinking about here is a more multisensory approach, where we're giving our learner loads of ways into that information. But what you have to have as your key way in, and again, this is where there's lots of discussion around this, knowing what your learners, the way that your learner best learns and retains information or overlearns information. But actually, print is print. The aesthetic principle is there. This is a sound that's, those skills, that knowledge, that cognitive understanding that this is print, these letters relate to the sounds that go together to make this word, I've then maybe had it in many different ways. I've maybe had all the shapes, I've had the symbols, I've used it in my writing, I've got it in the books, it's been pointed out to me. And when I see it, I have that automaticity. I can get it from that orthographic store and go, that's the.
Yes.
So there isn't one way, but one way that we have to be aware of is that those children, particularly those children that have those differences where it's going to be more difficult, get that chance to have that explicit teaching of skills about print. This is print. This is meaningful to you. This is something you could have to make a choice. So as Ginny was saying about the shape that you might take and indicate, fabulous, really, really useful, because that whole thing about I've got a choice and I can use a mark to indicate what my choice is. Now you're into the whole foundations of writing. Wonderful. And how that carries meaning. And then you kind of move it on to, do you know that this is your name. This is what it looks like. These are the sounds in your words. This is the shapes of the letters. Again, doing the block, all of that stuff. And actually slowly, let's just see, why don't you see, right, that's the activity you want. You've put the star on it. Which one of these is your name? Let's put your name there as well. So you're coming back to, and here's your print representing your name. And of course, name is something which we go back to again and again. But, actually, we need to look at all of those other meaningful words to them. If they know McDonald's really well, let's get that as a word. And let's start collecting the words they can read and recognize.
And I think for a lot of us, when you start to read it, you recognize the shape of your name. So for me, it's a big D, low, short up, E. So it's so I think you have the star, you look at the star and you go, cool. And then at some point that star gets removed and you might not be fluent in reading your name yet, but you would recognize the shape and you can find that shape in a list. You can work out which group and you start to recognize the shape. And then you start to actually then realize, actually, these are the letters we've been learning. And it all starts linking together.
Yeah. But again, I mean, I wouldn't even, sometimes we rush to take the star away. We don't have to. Maybe we have other situations. Maybe they always have a star with their peg or that activity. But then you have other situations where you encourage that. Oh, do you remember? Let's quickly check your name again. And let's just go. You want to choose this for lunch. There's a list here. Have a quick look. Where's your name in that? Excellent. And let's just check the one that's on that peg with your star. Is it the same? So what you want is it slowly drip feed. It's that kind of nudge type approach and that's what this kind of episode is all about. It's about, this is really important to continue doing and to continue celebrating. Have that confidence that they can develop, that confidence that I know this. And when they start to struggle with other things, go back to the bits they could do.
Yeah.
I think also when I go back to think about when I taught reception, this idea of reading for purpose. Actually, Sarah, I want you to come to the sound with me. Here's your name. And actually, there's a real purpose to it. And I think what can happen, as you said it, there can be this weirdness happens when we give them a book. When we give them the reading scheme book, we end up, if we're not careful, on the reading scheme book treadmill and we forget the other things. I mean, I think it's really interesting what you're talking about because I am doing Duolingo in French and everything you're talking about, I can link to it because actually I know this word, I know this word, I don't know this word. So I'll go on to the next word and then I'll go back. And I think it's all of these processes. I think I know 3 words, but I don't know the 4th word, but that must be the 4th word because I know the other words. But this idea of, and as I say, Duolingo, you're always revisiting. So everything that you learn is kind of a small step. And I think we can want children to learn too quickly where they do need to return to those foundations, don't they?
And sometimes it's not even, and the too quickly bit, often we then take away the supports that were there. And that's what often happens at Key Stage 2. They'll move in and there were some supports there that really helped them with the kind of skills that they have been developing. And then they go into Keys and they're gone. And actually, you were saying that about the kind of reading scheme, sort of treadmill type thing. It's that I recently, one of the big things that I'm kind of doing a lot of work around is joy. I think it's Howell's influence there. But if we don't put into the early years a joy of sharing print-based activities with learners, making print joyful, um, all of those things, then it's going to be something which is really, really not going to be supportive to anyone.
It's interesting to talk about making it joyful. I'm literally thinking about to my children, and I think the joy, and I'm air quoting the word joy there, was about getting through the levels in the reading scheme. It was like a competition. And if you got to the next level, that's what made them happy. It wasn't the reading, it was progressing, because that's what was celebrated. And actually, and we used to do all the reading, Biff and Chip and all that stuff. But I'm not sure there was that much enjoyment going on. And we would, my wife, teacher, it's probably a teacher thing that you lot do this, but we would take photos over the summer holiday or whatever holiday we went on, whenever it was Easter or whatever, and make it into a little photo book. So there would be a picture and a nice simple sentence beneath, and we'd staple it together, and it would be a little book that they could read through about their summer. But it was kind of, again, they have the memories of what they did. They've got a picture. And as you were saying, Gina, they might know some of the words, but with their memory and the scene, they can work out what that missing word is they can't read. And over time, they maybe learn those words. But I think that was a bit they enjoyed when they read the story about themselves. And I don't know if many children get that joy.
I think with my son, it's interesting because he did not have a natural propensity to want to read whatever I did. And so I used to sit with him as he went to sleep, and we found a series of books that he liked and that he enjoyed. I think it was Horace Henry, and he just liked the humor, just loved the humor of it. And that was then, Sarah, me modeling the following of the text from left to right. He might one sentence, or he may read a word, which I knew he knew. And I think that's important as well, isn't it? This idea of actually enjoying it because, oh, well, I know that word. So there is no stress on the individual. But I think so much of it is modeling. I was in a nursery the other day, and it was gorgeous. A child brought me a book from home, and I just sat with the book. And then the child sat on the carpet, and then I started reading the book, and then the children came. I felt like, I don't know, Mary Poppins plus the Julie Andrews or something. The children came, but watch it.
I can imagine that.
Yeah. And they came over, and I was doing all my voices. Fortunately, there was a witch, which was always, a winner for me. But they came and they were enjoying it. But actually, I was holding a book as only a teacher can, upside down. They knew that the print had meaning because I was modeling it, and they were enjoying it as I was reading it. And I think that can get forgotten, can't it? The fact that actually I'm sharing this book, sharing it with a lot of children, and actually, and also that how we handle a book, this is the front cover, just explaining, actually this is the author, this is the person who wrote the book. Those things can easily get missed if we're not immersed in it ourselves and not enjoying it ourselves.
And I think the really important thing around all of this is that this all starts from a very young age. And that's what we're talking about in terms of those early kind of concepts around it, because actually we need to know it's something pleasurable. If all you get is kind of like speedy sound recognition, is kind of like all of that stuff where you're desperately, and I'm not saying because there's so much that our young people need in terms of development of the skills, but they need to have it embedded in that richness of, oh, what's this story about? What's going to happen here? Or this is a map of my local area, or a place I want to go, and look at where we need to find next. Or this is a story map that we're going to create our own and make choices about what might happen next. But that's about us. And actually, many young people are coming in, especially, into our early years and those kind of very young, at a young age, with limited exposure to books. Maybe because of the digital books that, that they may have, but actually within the home environment, there's nothing better than if we can encourage and get books back into the hands of everyone, because there's something about a book. There's something about, it doesn't have to be, it can be fiction, it can be non-fiction, it could be anything that learner's interested or that young person wants to find out a bit more about, because you want them to kind of lean into it. You want them to, as they did with you, Ginny, bring something to you, or know that I'm going to do this and this is going to be something which I'm going to get enjoyment out of. Because you embed all of that stuff at the early ages when it's really tricky, year 4, year 5, moving forward, and they have to be using books for information or for knowledge or for learning. You want them to have some of that resilience, as we were talking about before, that understanding that there is a bit of practice here. There's a bit of kind of development of my understanding about, this is a word, this is a full stop, this is how I turn the page, this is where the next bit of information might be, this is the contents, this is how I know if I might enjoy a book. Let's look at what the cover has. What do I think might be going on looking at the picture? And just building up the fact that we do need to understand things around phonics and all of that, but building it into a richness of fun and joy. And actually, we can't do that enough. But using print to find something, get something, choose something that you want is all part of that.
I was just hearing you, Ginny, talking about, I can imagine you doing all those voices without a doubt. But it is that sort of thing. You could have that book and you could have a child who is literally reading the words. And when they're reading that book, they are focusing on each and every single word. And they're not going to take that much meaning from it because their focus is on the words. Then you might get a child reading that book a year later and they're going to read it quite fluently. They're reading it. And you can go, but then when you get a teacher who knows the witch, who knows the setting, and when it talks about, it has a word, they were walking in a marsh, and that teacher does the exaggerated steps and talking about it, and you're literally pulling every single bit of detail out of every single word in that book to really transport them. I think that modeling is helping people going, there is so much meaning in this book and it can be understood in different levels, but this is really ultimately what we're aiming for, is to really kind of be in the book.
Yeah. It's that critical thinking as well, that kind of that awareness of, well, you can be transported. You can be taken anywhere. Actually, it's not even just about academic success. Of course, it isn't. It's the well-being that, when I feel really rubbish when I'm older, or when, I could just pick up a great book. I could, whether you listen to it, however you, but there might be something in there which gives me enjoyment, further understanding about something, enables me to make choices a bit better about my life and what's happening next. And I think it's all of that that's so important. And we should never assume, because actually that's one of the things I think for those children, particularly that struggle, we shouldn't assume that they know all this. Actually, we often, when we're looking at phonics, one of the things that I have said to me a lot is, they know the sounds, but they can't decode it. But actually, there's an explicitness that we have to teach about the direction that we read in, the way that we do it, continuously teaching kind of, and showing and pointing to the print as you're going across the page, so that you're just making it that continual overlearning and embedding the behaviours needed.
And I think this idea of repetition is so important. When we think of we're going on a bear hunt, when we think of the Julia Donaldson books with the repetition, this idea of, and teachers, I think, do this automatically, that, sitting there reading the book and then missing out the word, and the children say the word because the children know the word, because they've heard the word so much. And what I love is many books now you can get them as hardback cardboard books. So they are accessible from such a young age. But what I love, Sarah, is it's the same story. It's the same words from when they are a baby. And actually the grown up who cares about that child is sharing that story. They're sharing the repetition. And then what I find really fascinating is you take that book, and then I will do it in a different way. I might do it in a rap, but they still know it. And their ears pricked up and they go, I still know this story, but it's being done in a different way that is exciting. One thing I want to ask Sarah is, if we have a book that the children know very well, is there scope, is there usefulness in taking sentences apart and getting children to actually make sentences again? So we get a sentence from the book, we cut it up and we give it to them. Is there usefulness in children then reordering that sentence?
I mean, anything which gives them the confidence and that sense of achievement around language. You can use that as a springboard to do the next thing of maybe them writing their own version of that text or that book. I've got a great one here I picked up in the charity shop, The Teenager Who Came to Tea. So using the tiger who came to tea, it's great. The teenager empties all the cupboards, is constantly texting on their phone. It's just brilliant. But again, what we're trying to do is use that confidence, that shared opportunity to work together, use that to then move them forward, have those next steps with things. And I think we don't, taking them too far out, it's that zone of proximal development. It's that thing of like that sweet spot where they're just in that development of where they're going to grow in terms of that knowledge. It's not too easy. It's not too hard. And so it's actually building on something they can do and then moving it the next. What do we want them to do? We want them to be empowered to make a choice, but then to start being an author of their own reading material, of their own writing. And that's that link, which is so key.
And I got a book from a charity shop, Mega Mog. And when I open this, you see, it's similar. Frog in a bog, bat in a hat. That's a springboard, isn't it? From actually, what are you going to write for your words? And I think this idea of it being a springboard for writing my own page and then it becoming a class book, because that's another thing, isn't it, Sarah, about actually we're starting off with this, but then actually let's make our own class book, which we want the children to read, which they've then got ownership of. It just is all about children enjoying the books that they're reading.
And it's using the language. So this is the whole thing around the print concepts, is that we want them to understand the way that print works, understand the way the book works, understand the way language works in terms of who is listening to the writing that we've created, or who is listening to whatever's being read. And there's different tones needed. If it's Mega Mog, maybe for an early years audience, and actually for an older audience, oh great, The Teenager Who Came to Tea. Why might that appeal? Because it's about stuff that's familiar to me. It's about my experiences. But it's also around, and this is particularly, I think, with the phonics debate again, it's about putting those sounds that they've been learning into the stories or pulling them out of the stories. Oh, look, this is another favourite of mine, Pooh in the Zoo, the ooh sound, actually, pulling it out. Oh gosh, what sounds are in this book that we've been learning? Or Shark in the Park, a great one for the digraphs, that AR. So we need to be constantly referencing back to print, that we're not just learning these things in isolation. We're learning them because we want you to access some of this great information that's out there, have that opportunity to be part of this great literacy world. Another book there, look, Would You Rather. You've got to love those books.
Love it.
But again, what you want with these books is having that opportunity to have small bits of text, because we've concentrated a bit on that early information. As our learners get older, they're still struggling, or emergent literacy users, they need to still have the same opportunities to overlearn that print with like a Mega Mog book. But actually, if they're 9, that's not going to work. We're going to need to make sure that we're giving them that chance to read that, the print that they're going to want to access anyway, first of all. And things like jokes, would you rather, recipes, instructions for things, all of that gives you a chance to maybe write your own text or read the text, the short bursts of text, but to build up that understanding of, this is how I need to write instructions. This is the kind of language I need to use. This is when I'm writing a recipe. These are the kind of words that I use. This is the way that I help with understanding. With a joke, this is what the way that I might need to phrase things. So it's really important that we give them that experience.
And that understanding is a really important bit. That understanding is, you're often bringing them into words, concepts they may not have come across. How often do you experience a marsh in your everyday life? Or a witch? We mostly all have witches because of Wizard of Oz and things like that idea of that
Yeah.
scary witch. And actually, is that watched these days? What is their idea of a witch? Is it just Meg and Mog and she's quite lovely and funny and all that sort of stuff? Are you scared of a witch? It's all those
Yeah.
sorts of understandings that we have from our own experiences that sometimes we have to share. My daughter loves some music, old music from the 90s. And she'll put this song on and she's singing along. And I go, do you know what that is? And she's like, no, she knows the word, but it was slang for something in the 90s, or it's a brand that was around in the 90s that she will no idea what it is. And if you say this sentence, so one of them is, Summertime, Fresh Prince. Adjust the bass and let the Alpine blast. What does that mean to you? Any idea what the Alpine is?
I think it's the air freshener they used to have in the BMW, the cars.
Nope.
No. Oh.
It's a brand of car stereo. So, of course, you'd adjust the bass and turn the volume up and let it blast. But I had an Alpine stereo. The concept's there. I completely understand that statement. But my daughter, you're not into it. It's just certain things as we read, as we learn, as we do. We have our understanding. Do our children have the same understanding? And as you said, telling a joke, will they understand the joke? What is it I need to put in there to help them understand? And as you realize with all of this, as you use these words, as you read these words, it's sharing something. It's a meaning and there's understanding in here. And sometimes with all these things, you might miss out the emotions. You might, because it's not written explicitly. But a dog barked from behind them. Cool. As a matter of fact, there's a dog behind them is barking, but how would you feel? And it's helping them understand that they've got to kind of put themselves in those situations. What would you feel? Right, so what would you do? And as you read the book, A Snail and the Whale example, what was wrong with the whale being on the beach? Why was that wrong? Unless you know about whales and they need to be in the water and all that. All those sorts of things, you need to have the understanding to get why the snail did what it did.
And it's all that implicit kind of information around vocabulary. And actually, that's the key. We know now through all the research, we know that actually one of the biggest issues in terms of reading struggles and literacy and writing, that all aspects of literacy is about that impoverished background in terms of vocabulary and understanding of what words mean. And actually, there's that whole thing around the tiers of words. So kind of like that tier one being the words we hear and having conversation, that kind of basic sort of vocabulary. That tier two, which is this stuff that we get in books. So the tier two is where we need to be targeting our learners. The tier three, we often teach that because it's subject specific vocabulary, photosynthesis or something you might teach within a topic. But it's the tier two stuff that, as you said there, Dale, that not only is it about, so understanding why it might be tricky if a whale is on the beach, because actually maybe we talk about whales, they're in stories, but you might live in Birmingham. The fact that the opportunities for you to have met a whale is probably pretty slim. And not that I'm saying that because maybe not, you might have gone to lots of places. You could have gone to Florida, you could have gone, but, it's that understanding that our learners' worlds are actually shrinking quite a lot, because there's less outside play. There was obviously that massive period of the pandemic when the world for everyone shrank. And actually that hasn't quite gone back to how it was. And so we're in a situation where we have to actively, explicitly teach the words, give that opportunity to get those words in lots of different contexts, but also teach the way that we use print.
I'll tell you what I find quite interesting is this idea of getting children to look at some text from a book and then getting them because you've copied it, getting them to find out how many times the same word appears. And I find that fascinating because they go, what? The word there is in this page so many times. And sometimes, by highlighting them or getting children to highlight them, that is quite unlocking for children who may find that difficult, because every word, well, you will tell me, Sarah, but I think sometimes every word is a new word. And to actually anchor them down and to go, this word, hey, it's the yellow word, it's that yellow word again. Oh, that, oh, that, and I think ways that we can unlock it, unlock text for children, for them to go, oh, that word again. I don't know what is that something that,
and it's that high frequency words, those kind of words which occur a lot within the English language. And although actually they can often be decoded, phonetically decoded, actually they're much harder because a lot of the patterns you don't learn until much later on, some of that. And actually for ease and for confidence and for enabling you to access text, as you were saying, you need to know what the word you need to know the word was, you need to know certain words. And so actually, the more that we can give that chance, as you said, highlighting, wow, look how many times that word appears, is really important. Again, having those opportunities to have that word around. I know when my son was we were looking at, and again, I do this for a job, and I'm constantly going out training, and then I'm there with my son, I think when he was probably about 7, and I was like, it was there on the last page, and it's there on this page. What else can I do? And actually, what we did was, it's drawing attention to it. Is we had Post-it notes, and we chose three words of those, and we had them all around the house. And it was who could find, and it was just over a week or 2 weeks, and you'd overlearn that word. And that's what we mean about those print concepts, is that some of the information that we expect our young people to have, we expect them to learn it through a bit of osmosis, or we do it quickly in the lesson in this session. And actually, why aren't you? When actually, what if learner has processing needs, if there's executive function differences, if there's issues with the kind of hearing of the sounds and then retaining that, all of those things are going to lead to it's more difficult, which means they need more repetition. Doesn't mean we don't do it. It just needs to be really more repetition and more multisensory ways into it. And what better way into it is through a book with props and words.
I like your idea of highlighting those words, because often my daughter would get a bit overwhelmed about giving too much text. But actually, if we went through and highlighted every the, every what, all those as, and all the words she knows, you'd probably end up in that block. You'd probably highlight 75% of it. And actually, there's only 25% of them are words she's maybe not read before or not confident with. And if you highlight, 75% is text off by heart already. Is that helping them realize that?
Yeah.
Helping them going, actually, yeah. And actually, I do know that word, and I know that word. And you end up with maybe 3 or 4 words that she may struggle with. And you see the children going up and standing up with their little bits of paper in school productions and reading. They're all watching them so nervous. But actually, if you highlight all the ones you already know, and you're basically saying, don't worry about these ones, you've got this, and you've got this. But this white one we haven't highlighted, that's probably the one you've got to focus on. Not focus on everything and worry. There's just maybe a few you need to focus on.
And I think what you're doing, Dale, is you're giving them that opportunity to have that kind of extra bit of information about those words. And it's that kind of like, I've seen it, it's got colour on it. I know that means I've seen it before and I know it. So I've got another bit of a tag of information for it to go into that long-term memory. So you've got all of that information together, and also you're giving them confidence. It's okay. I can read these, I know these words. I've already met them before. So really important.
And I'll tell you what I love to do sometimes: cover up the words on a page, and we've got the picture, and then I say, tell me what's happening, tell me the story. We write it down. We're owning it. We're owning what is happening on that page. We will then look and we'll go, actually, ours is better. And they're often using the words that they would be reading, but because they're saying it, because they're owning it, there is more of an understanding and a breaking down, I should think, Sarah, isn't there? Of that, well, I don't know what it says, to, hey, this is what it says because I'm the author. And that goes back to it. Actually, an author is somebody who writes words. You've written words. Another thing that I think we sometimes forget to do is have a group of children. Right, let's all sit together. If we've got children who are finding this a little bit tricky or just need a boost of confidence, let's all sit together to do it. I remember the days where we used to have the big books. You remember when we had the big books on an easel, and we had a pointer, and I'd cover up a lot of it, and then we'd write it together. And it was a real, I'm saying it was a real event, it was a real event. But it was, we had Peter Pointer, who wants to have Peter Pointer, you'd cover up one word with a sticky note or whatever. And actually, one thing that I used to love doing was what were they? Were they the Osborne books, the non-fiction books? And I'd photocopy a page and cover up some of the words, and the children had to decide what they thought the word should be. And then we'd have a ceremonial unveiling of what the word was, and then we'd go, actually, our word is better. It's all, and I used to always take me back. I used to love that.
Can I be in your
Dale's got
class?
his hand up.
Can I
Yes,
be in your
Dale.
class? It sounds fun.
I know. But you see, Dale, the big thing about all of that is, again, you're making print fun. And that's what this whole episode really is about. It's about making sure that our learners have got the best foundation, the most solid kind of like understanding of print being something which can be fun. Yes, it can be a bit tedious at times, but then that's also, we need to get through that tedious bit if we want to drive a car. My goodness, the highway code, that was so tedious for me. But if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have ever been able to drive. But, it's those things of like, do you know what? There's some bits in life we've just got to master those skills, and they'll lead to something else.
Well, I think what you can level up Ginny's game even further by like getting a Julia Donaldson book or that where you know the rhythm, and block out a sentence and say, right, you write your own line. Because not only do you have to write your own line, but it's got to fit the rhythm. So that brings back that phonological awareness. It brings all those skills. What's the context of what I've got to write? What has got to fit in? Does it have to rhyme at the end? And you can just level it up and bring it in. And I do this with my wife all the time. A song comes on the radio, I have to completely change the words, sing it silly, make her laugh. But it is that understanding the concept of the song, knowing the rhythm, and being able to pull out those words out of your head that will fit into that and make sense.
But that's all of that. It's fabulous. And all of that is giving you that understanding about whichever words you choose to use might change the way what the song is about, and then what it makes you feel about that song. The same with the story. Using some of those different, words, the heart of comprehension is that words make me feel a certain way. And actually it's about having that cue into, you can change words as well. You can it's understanding about those concepts around the way that print works, the way that letters and sounds go together, the way that words go together to create sentences, to create books, to create poems, to create songs.
And I think it's about knowing your children. It's about knowing what will support this individual child, that they will feel valued and that they will feel listened to, will be very different for another child. And I think it does come back to that about actually this child would really enjoy just changing one word, and their sheet may be like that, or a whole group may do it together, and it's about stopping the barriers being put up, and another thing is I do strongly believe this. I think Dale was pertaining to it, revisiting books that we have read when we were younger and saying, shall we have a look at this book together? Or, having a richness of books, is it? Like you were saying, Sarah, the Highway Code, the Guinness Records, let's have Where's Wally in there, because that actually, let's all be a bit crazy. Let's get a Where's Wally page and let's write a narrative about that, because actually children love that. And the richness of what they write will really show their kind of capabilities more than sometimes we narrow it down, don't we?
And to become fluent, to get that fluency, you've got to have had that feedback of, I can do this. And you then get that feedback from the text. I know about it. And as you were saying there, Dale, I know these words. I know this. I can have a go at this. I've got the skills to work out what this might be, or to use some of the other information to help me work this out. But I understand how print works. And I think that is the key.
I was just thinking, going back to my daughter's readings and the Biff and Chip and all that sort of stuff, is you kind of move on to the next level when you can decode the words. It's not about your understanding. It's not about your enjoyment of it, or really kind of of how you use that. And I don't want to then turn it into, you can't move up the level unless you answer these 5 questions. But it's about, how can you enjoy the books? How can you read Biff and Chip? Cool, you've read Biff and Chip. What have you got from it? How could you write it your way? That story was about them losing something. What have you lost? That's what in reality the reading should be about, is you've learned something. You've learned not just how to read the words, but there'll be longer words, there'll be harder words, more meaning behind them. It's not I sat, is I shifted in my seat. So he was sitting, but he was not comfortable, or it's those phrases. What does that mean? And it's not just if I can read shifting in a seat. How do we really demonstrate that understanding? And how do we kind of play with that? Because that's ultimately what we really want out of these books.
And I've loved putting sticky notes in books for children. So as they're reading a book, there is a question in that book. They answer the question and they come to an adult to answer that. I've got sticky notes. So I need to tell you, I need to answer this question from this book, and it does all come back to the enthusiasm, and then we go back. I mean, so many teachers do and schools do, book of the week, or, the book I'm reading, so then we have those conversations. So it isn't reading in a silo. I've had children literally come up to me, tug my cardy and go, I need to tell you about this book, because I know you like it and I like this bit. Do you like this bit? Now that is, I think, kind of the magic, isn't it?
It's what you get from the book. It's not getting through a book. What do you get from the book is ultimately what we're after.
Yeah.
Anything else to add before we go?
I think probably it's about that accessibility again as well, thinking that from the start, that you're making print accessible. Actually, if you're giving it meaning, if you're bringing it to life, if you're showing it in lots of different ways, if you've got symbols, if you're doing, you've got a sensory story and you're showing that this is the story that goes with it. So it's actually, print is here you're constantly making it accessible. This is okay. You can learn about print. This is all, where it's all around us. It's for everyone. And I think that is key. That's what I would say.
I think mine is, going back to when I was reading a book with the preschool, I went in the classroom, the child brought the book to me. That was an opportunity. And I think when we have children who are coming up to us with books, we have to take that as an opportunity, because if we aren't enthusiastic at that moment, they will take that book away.
And Ginny, at that point, actually, make sure we have got the books they want to pick up and bring to you. How many Key Stage 2 classes or classrooms are there, actually for those learners that maybe do struggle a little bit more with literacy, not necessarily even just books, pamphlets, catalogues, all of those kind of ways that they might be like, oh, let's have a look at this.
Definitely. I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you for coming on the show today. As always, I enjoyed it. I just love podcasting with you two because I never have to speak. You two have got the whole show in your hands. I can just sit here and take a day off, which is lovely.
I think you spoke, Dale.
I've also learned I want to be in Ginny's classroom. So as always, I'll be sharing Sarah and Ginny's contact details, links to their books and anything else they've shared with me. And you'll find the show notes, as always, wherever you listen to the podcast or on the website. And please follow us on social medias. On Twitter, we're at The SENCast. On Facebook, The SENCast. On Instagram, The SENCast. On Blue Sky, The SENCast. And guess what? We are on TikTok, The SENCast. And please use social media to share The SENCast with others. Now, everyone knows B Squared are here to help schools show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we have created a lot of assessment framework. What we've been working over the last few years is an inclusive assessment system that can be used with all pupils in primary schools. The system has different levels of details for different levels of mobility, but it makes looking at whole school data and comparing your SEND pupils and your non-SEND pupils really, really simple. And just using one system makes it more inclusive. You're not using a separate measuring stick or anything like that. It's all in one system. And obviously using one system reduces teacher workload. It's one system to learn. It's consistent data, and also using one system will save your school money. And if you are interested and want to find out more on how you can use it across the whole primary school, you'll find a link to our website and a link to book a meeting with me in the show notes. And you can also find out about our online training, all the conferences and events we do, read our blog, watch our webinars, and everything else we do. It's all on the B Squared website. So thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the SENCast. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.